Welcome to Home Care Matters, the show where we discuss all things home care, with discussions on important age-related matters and topics. Brought to you by Enriched Life Home Care Services, the #1 rated home care provider in Michigan by Top Rated Local.
Hello and welcome back to All Home Care Matters. If this is your first time visiting us here at the show, thank you for taking time out to be with us today. We appreciate how valuable everyone's time is, and that is why we try and make each episode here at All Home Care Matters something that will hopefully matter to you. On today's show, we are going to talk about the warning signs of dementia. A lot of times when we talk with families or get emails about dementia, we often hear them refer to dementia as Alzheimer's or other forms, or they'll say something like, my mom didn't have dementia, she had Alzheimer's. This is fairly common, and quite often families don't realize that Alzheimer's is part of dementia. We call it the dementia umbrella, and that is because Alzheimer's is under the dementia umbrella, and the reason that most families don't realize this is because Alzheimer's happens to be by far the most common form of dementia. But there are several others. Let's take a moment and talk about the dementia umbrella and the various forms and types of dementia that are under it. First, as we mentioned, is Alzheimer's, which accounts for about 50 to 70% of all diagnoses of dementia. Then there is vascular dementia, which accounts for the second most at 20 to 30%. Lewy body dementia averages 10 to 25% for diagnoses. And finally, frontotemporal dementia, which is the least common at 10 to 15%. We will be doing shows on these forms of dementia, but for today, we wanted to give you an idea of what it means when somebody says dementia and how it could be any one of those forms. But typically, they're referring to Alzheimer's, but not always. And we wanted you to see the variation and the commonalities of each of the forms of dementia. So today, as we said, we're going to discuss the warning signs of dementia. This can sometimes be very difficult to identify right away, as it typically, but not always, starts out slowly and gradually and becomes more progressive. A good friend of ours here at All Home Care Matters that has partnered with us and Enriched Life Home Care for years works with us to host, facilitate, and run dementia ministry series that we, along with her, provide to professionals as well as the community to help better educate them in this horrible disease, as well as help them to be better caregivers for their loved ones. Our friend, whose name is Carol, is one of the foremost leading dementia experts here in Michigan and has authored countless books on a wide array of issues as it relates to dementia, and is just a blessing for these families and to us as we value her friendship immensely. One of the most truest statements that one can say about a person with dementia is that if you've seen one person with dementia, you've seen one person with dementia. And this is because this disease can and does affect people so differently and at different times. If you have a loved one with dementia, or you have cared for someone with dementia and watched as it progressed, some of you may say it went extremely quick, while others may say it was a very slow progression. The same could be said for symptoms as well. I personally will never forget a wonderfully sweet lady who needed our assistance to help with her care because the family was not qualified or able to logistically be there for her as much as she would need. And when we first began helping her, she was alert, aware, and ambulatory, and had no significant health issues at all, other than she was in the very early stages of dementia, and it was so early on that unless you spent any real significant time with her, it would be very difficult to differentiate between age-related memory loss and actual dementia-related memory loss. After about a month or so, we had received a phone call that she was unable to use her walker, which was a little strange as we had just been at her home 2 days earlier, and so a case manager went to the home to evaluate. And as the staff said, she couldn't use the walker. After spending some time that day with her, it became clear that it wasn't that she couldn't use it. She had no physical problems, but it was because she forgot how to use her legs. This was one of the quickest progressions that I have personally and professionally witnessed. And to give you an even clearer picture of how dementia can work, from that day to over 7 years later, she had no further cognitive decline aside from that first month when we first began helping her. Now, this isn't always typical, but it's not atypical either. As we said, many people have various experiences and progressions with dementia. In this particular woman's situation, it was literally less than 48 hours earlier she was using her walker and getting around her home to forgetting how to use her legs so that she could use her walker. And it remained that way for 7 more years. But there was no other major significant declines or progression. It would have been easy to expect that her decline would have continued, maybe rapidly or maybe slowly after that initial incident, but thankfully that was the only real significant decline and progression of her dementia, and she was otherwise an extremely healthy lady. This is what makes dementia so difficult, hard, and emotionally and physically draining for families. It is very unpredictable and uncertain, and many times and difficult to anticipate. Another point that is difficult for families is oftentimes the dementia can already be starting and families may not be aware until something significant takes place. Another example I would like to share with you is a sweet woman who had lived by herself and had 2 adult children. One lived fairly local but had many obligations, and she was about an hour or so away from her mother's, and another who lived out of state. We were hired to help and assist her, but only twice a week for running errands and small things like that. Well, after some time with her, we began getting reports from staff and case managers that there was some concern that some things were off, and the family was notified, and the one who lived out of state began calling his mom a few more times a week, and he felt that she sounded fine and had good conversations with her. And the other child, who was her daughter, lived more locally and would stop in on the weekends when she wasn't at work and to check in. And they both kept that routine up until one day our staff, who happened to be at the home, called the office to say her home was going to be taken away because she hadn't paid her taxes in several years and she was out of warnings. The family had no idea, and we hadn't been there long enough to have known anything about the situation, and we were only there twice a week to begin with. This was a big red flag, and coupled with our concerns that we had been expressing, they had her tested, and she was not able to pass the cognitive test for dementia. As we explained to the family, and that the doctor explained also, oftentimes individuals compensate for their memory loss either consciously or unconsciously and hide it the best they can for as long as they can until something happens, like not paying your property taxes for several years or forgetting how to get home from the grocery store and ending up driving around the block for hours until someone hopefully notices. These are all signs of serious issues and dementia, but they aren't always this obvious. Like this last example, her children would call her and they would have a typical conversation like, "How was your day?" and little superficial comments and things, just nothing really deep below the surface. It makes it that much harder if you aren't local or aren't able to physically stop in and see your parent or loved one, and even more difficult when you get indications that everything seems to be fine. We are going to discuss some of these warning signs to look for, and if you think you're seeing some of these, and you'll know your parents or loved ones better than anyone else, make sure you contact their doctor and have them in for a checkup. Usually dementia has been going on for a while, albeit it's typically very subtle, before they are actually diagnosed with it. So what are the warning signs? These can vary greatly. Having difficulty with short-term memory. Maybe you have a conversation or have been planning an event like a wedding or birthday party or something like that, and they forgot or forget all about it. Remembering where they put things like their keys, phone, wallet, or purse. This one we've talked about already, but paying their bills on time or paying them at all. Doing their banking and being able to keep track of their finances. Remember to plan and prepare meals, and in some cases even eating their meals. Attending appointments such as their doctors or hair or nails or other appointments that they have made. Leaving the neighborhood. Will they travel out of town? Or if you live out of town, do they make excuses now not to have to come out to your home, instead rather have you come there? These issues or symptoms do not guarantee dementia, but the sooner it is evaluated by a physician, the better. This allows for planning and preparing, as well as getting started with treatment as soon as possible, like volunteering for clinical trials and studies. Remember, there's no true cure for dementia, regardless of the form that you have. Vascular dementia is the one form of dementia, and I say this with a lot of hesitation, that does have a potential for a cure. And that just typically means that there's been a decrease or a lack of blood flow to the brain, sometimes caused by a stroke or clogged arteries and things like that. And sometimes you will see an improvement if they are able to correct and increase the blood flow. But typically, all forms of dementia are not reversible. Remember, there's no single test to diagnose dementia, but doctors can determine if someone has it with a pretty high level of certainty after they do a very significant, thorough examination. This is a terrible disease, and as we all work towards a cure, the better informed we are, the better we can care and support families and loved ones who are going through this journey. We did use part of the information for this episode of All Home Care Matters from the Alzheimer's Foundation and their website. We encourage you to learn more by visiting alz.org. alz.org. It has wonderful resources, support, articles, and information about this disease and illness that can hopefully help you in your journey. We appreciate you taking the time and being here with us today at All Home Care Matters. All Home Care Matters is here for you and to help families as they navigate long-term care issues. Please visit us at allhomecarematters.com. There is a private, secure, fillable form there where you can give us feedback, show ideas, or if you have questions. Every form that's submitted is read and responded to. We hope you'll join us next time on All Home Care Matters, where we are going to talk about tips for when the time comes your parents may need more help. Thank you so much for being here. And remember, if you know somebody that's going through this with a loved one or a family member, please share this episode with them. Thank you so much.
Thank you for joining us today. We look forward to you joining us again on another episode of Home Care Matters. To learn more about the show and to connect with us, visit us at allhomecarematters.com.